Now the problem we're about to do has to do with additive genes. Now the question asks us to assume that in squashes the difference in fruit weight between a 3-pound type and a 6-pound type results from 3 independently segregating allele pairs AA, BB, and CC. And now that we know that they're independently segregating, we know that the probability of any genotype for the offspring is the same thing as multiplying the probabilities of the genotypes for each allele pair. Now each capital letter contributes half a pound to the weight in the squash. That's how additive genes work. Now, from a cross between a 3-pound plant, which is all recessive homozygous, and a 6-pound plant, which is all homozygous dominant, what will be the phenotypes weights of the F1 and F2, and what will be their distribution? Now, we know that if you're homozygous dominant, each capital letter contributes half a pound, and so we have a 3-pound base weight. So our base weight is 3 pounds, and then plus 0.5 times the number of capital letters, right? So AA, so basically we have 6 over here for our homozygous dominant. That's how we get our 6 pounds. Now, how do we determine the phenotypes of the F1 offspring? Well, this shouldn't be too bad for F1, since we know that if we have a true breeding crossed with another true breeding, right? One that's all capital letters and one that's all lowercase letters, the F1 offspring shouldn't be too bad to calculate. It's just going to be heterozygous at all the alleles. Now, what's its weight going to be? Well, we know that there's a base weight of 3 pounds, right? Plus 0.5 pounds for each capital letter, and we have 3 capital letters, so that gives us 4.5 pounds. Now, it's going to be a little bit harder for the F2. Now, how will their distribution happen? Well, we're going to have a heterozygous for all genes, or all alleles, crossed with another heterozygous for all alleles, right? And we get, if we make Punnett squares for each and every one of these alleles, we have a 1/4 chance of getting 2A alleles, 1/4 chance of getting a big A and little a, rather 1/2, big A, little a, and a 1/4 chance of little a, little a. And that's for the A alleles. And we know that if you have 2 big A alleles, this is going to contribute at 1 pound, right? And if you're heterozygous, you're going to contribute half a pound. And if you're homozygous recessive, you're going to contribute 0 pounds to the base weight. And the same thing goes for the B alleles. You have 1/4, 1/2, 1/4. You have big B, big B, big B, little b, and little b, right? And this is going to contribute 1 pound, a half pound, and we have 0 pounds for the last one, right? So this is half, and that's 0. And I'm not going to write the rest over here, but we already know that it's going to be 1/4, 1/2, and 1/4 for the C alleles, right? Now, how do we calculate with the probabilities of each and every weight? Now, we could just do a branch diagram, right, for every single one, but that would be way too much because we can have different combinations to give us the same weight. For example, if we combine big A, big B, big B, and big C, we get the maximum weight, right? And that would be our 6 pounds, right? But to do that, we have a 1/4 probability, 1/4, and times 1/4. So that's a 1/64 chance of getting 6 pounds, right? And the same thing goes for having our smallest weight, which would be 0 pounds contributed from the alleles, and we get just 3 pounds. But there's different ways of getting the middle weights. For example, if we combine big A, big B, but then big C, little c, right? We get 5.5 pounds, right? But there's also another way of doing that. We can do big A, big C, but then big B, little b. And then the same thing goes. We can combine big B, big C, but then the big A, little a. So there's 3 different ways of contributing that. And the same thing and then you get even more combinations as you grow more towards the middle. Now, there is a little trick to do this. It's called the binomial distribution, right? Because what are we really looking at? We're looking at whether you have a big letter or not. We're not looking at which specific allele you have, but rather, do you have a big letter or a small letter? And so the way to do this is you look at the coefficients of a binomial distribution. So let's say X is our big letters and Y is our small letters. We have 6 different positions in which we have our letters, right? And so this would be to the power of the 6. And the coefficients that we see with each will tell us the probability out of 64 for having that weight. Now, I would not suggest that you do this distribution and look at the coefficients, but look at Pascal's triangle, because that's basically what Pascal's triangle can do. Over here, you have one position. If you have only one position for allele, you look at this. There's only one way of having each possible way. So look, if you have Pascal's triangle and one possible position for allele, you either are a big letter, only one possibility, either a big letter or a small letter. But say you have two positions for big letter, small letter. You can have homozygous dominant, heterozygous, or homozygous recessive. Look, and that's if you have. And now if you have three positions, right? You have the possibility of being homozygous dominant, one type of heterozygous, another type of heterozygous, and then homozygous recessive, right? And then same thing goes over here. If you have four positions, you have one possibility for homozygous dominant for both for basically or big letter for all positions. You have four ways of having three big letters and one small letter. Six ways of having two big letters, two small letters. Four ways of having three small letters and one big letter, and then one way of having all small letters. And you can keep going to the amount that we need. So we need to get to 6 positions, right? So we can expand that triangle even more over here. We get 10, 10, 5, and 1. And if we expand the triangle even more, we have 1, 6, 15, 20, 15, 6, and 1. And this is for 6 positions. So this is basically the coefficients that we see when we have to order two things in 6 different ways, right? And so actually, for this problem, in order to find the probabilities for each and every weight, we're going to use this set of coefficients from Pascal's triangle, because we can have one way of ordering all capital letters, one way of ordering all capital letters, one way of ordering all small letters, 6 ways of ordering 5 capital letters and 1 small letter, or 6 ways of ordering 5 small letters and 1 capital letter, and it keeps going on and on. And so you have 20 ways of doing 3 capital letters and 3 small letters. And so our probabilities will be 1/64, 6/64 over here, 15/64, 20, and then 15, 6, and 1. These are all out of 64, and this over here would go to 6 pounds, right? This would be 5.5, this would be 5, 4.5, 4, and this would be 3.5, and 3. And notice from the ideas that we learn from quantitative genetics is that it distributes evenly. And if we look at this graph in terms of the distribution of the phenotypes, we notice that it looks something a little bit like this, where we have our middle weight over here has the highest probability, and as we go to the higher weight or the lower weight, our probability goes down. And that's exactly how it is. And this is basically what happens when you have multiple alleles that contribute in an additive way. But that's basically how we find the probabilities of additive genes.